Hello, I'm Jonasz Rewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. As always, I hope you enjoy the journey. On this episode, we're diving deep into a chilling wake-up call from the heart of Russia, a land where security promises by the strongman himself, Vladimir Putin, seem as shaky as a table missing one leg. Russia, a global powerhouse with a supposedly mighty security apparatus, is where recent brutal terrorist attacks have laid bare a startling truth. Despite Putin's firm pledges of ironclad security, the stark reality is that the security state is, well, slumbering on the job. You might ask, what's going on? We'll try to answer these questions, but first, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Russia's Southern Republic of Dagestan is in mourning following the attack that left 20 people dead. Gunmen targeted a Jewish synagogue, 2 Orthodox Christian churches, and a police station in Dagestan's capital. Most of the victims were police officers, with dozens of civilians injured. Despite the violence, there has been no direct claim of responsibility. Dagestan, a major Muslim region, is home to a diverse mix of ethnicities and religious faiths. However, it is no stranger to Islamic extremism. Critics argue that the attack highlights a security lapse by the Kremlin, which has been preoccupied with its war in Ukraine and may have overlooked emerging extremist threats at home. 3 months ago, gunmen from an Islamic State splinter group carried out a deadly attack on Moscow concert hall, killing 145 people and injuring hundreds. Conspiracy theories have also emerged, with some Kremlin loyalists suggesting that the attack was a part of a wider Western plot to destabilize Russia from within. Local officials, on the other hand, believe that the attackers aim to ignite violence in this ethnically and religiously diverse region. Sergei Melikov, the Kremlin-appointed head of the Republic of Dagestan, condemned the violence, calling it an attempt to tear apart the region's unity.
And now, as always, it's time to take a look at the issue in greater detail. Over the years, Russia has built a sprawling surveillance state, hoping to control everything from public dissent to terrorist threats. Yet somehow, with all this focus on surveillance and control, they have missed stopping lethal attacks, 2 in the past 3 months. This isn't just failing to prevent tragedies, it's a whole system that's stumbling over its own fate. Under the watchful eyes of the FSB, Russia's modern-day KGB, extensive networks of cameras and digital tracking are the norm. Authorities boast about preventing crimes before they even happen. Yet, when it really counts, the safeguards fail, letting extremists slip through their fingers. Much like playing a game of whack-a-mole, but the moles are terror plots, and the hammer is, well, apparently lost somewhere in the Kremlin. For a country that prides itself on strong leadership and military prowess, these lapses aren't just embarrassing, they are downright dangerous. While the Kremlin has been portraying itself as the stronghold of the battle against Western decay and moral bankruptcy, its own backyard is turning into a playground for extremist ideologies. Russia's focus on external adversaries and global dominance might be overshadowing the very real need to protect its own citizens. It's like sitting at the world's most expensive security system and leaving the back door wide open because, hey, who would dare, right? The Kremlin, busy with its geopolitical games, from Ukraine to Africa, is possibly overlooking threats at home. Now, you might be wondering, why does it all matter? Well, it's crucial because it highlights a significant crack in Russia's facade of control. The focus seems to be everywhere but on the home front, where it's most needed, apparently. Where should a country focus its energies if not on the safety and security of its people? The situation gets more complicated with the public perception of these failures. Well, for starters, Russia might need to recalibrate its legendary paranoia. It's no good scanning the horizon for threats if you ignore the termites in your own foundations. And where we stand, we get to watch as one of the world's most notorious control freaks learns a lesson in humility. Or not, actually, because if there is one thing more stubborn than Russian winter, it is Russian pride. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Witold Rotkiewicz, Senior Fellow at the Russian Department of the Center for Eastern Studies. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, it's a pleasure.
So, do you think, in the wake of the recent events, ordinary Russians could be losing their sense of security?
Well, I'm not sure that this is seen as a very peculiar regional issue, the Islamic terrorism, which is endemic or has been endemic in the North Caucasus. I'm not sure that the events that took place last week at Derbent and Makhachkala in Dagestan really are of any significant concern for average Russians in other parts of Russia. The terrorist attack that took place in near Moscow in Crocus City Hall, what was it, a month ago, or that was much more significant, and that was something that could have impacted the feeling of security of Russians. But I think this is still seen as a one-off. I don't think that this increased. I mean, I don't see any signs that the people's routine has changed because of that.
Right. I mean, recently there has been an article published by the Moscow Times, and basically a Russian political scientist that was interviewed for this article suggested that all these events combined, so war drawing closer to certain parts of Russia because of the long-range attacks, so that's one thing. Unrest in certain republics are both attributable to issues such as the expansion of extremism and Islam, but not just that, other issues as well. That combining this together also may actually bring about a phenomenon you could call like the gradual appearance of cracks on this facade of a country that is in full control of everything. Do you think that this could be, in the long run, the result of that, especially since Putin's rise to power, in the beginning at least, was predicated upon this sort of implicit contract that, I give you security, in exchange I might actually be reducing certain civic liberties, but you'll be feeling safe. Do you think that this now may turn out not to be the case anymore?
Well, it's very difficult to say. It's definitely the entire system has been based on this idea that, on the assumption that basically the authorities need to pay attention to the fact that there are no longer democratic elections, so there is no way to sort of the normal channels of discontent for expressing people's aspirations and fears and so on have been destroyed. So there are other techniques which are supposed to substitute for that, and the whole system was based on the assumption that that it doesn't really have mass positive support. It just is based on the passivity of the mass of the population. And with the situation becoming more difficult, yes, there is a steady erosion, but I think we are very far from this system collapsing. I don't see any sign in the very long run. Yes, in the short-term run, in the terms of a couple of years, I don't really see danger signs. I mean, there's a tendency in the West to expect a kind of miracle solution from the Russian side to the problem that Russian aggression against Ukraine and against the West forms. So we just we can continue on our ways, and we can sort of treat the war in Ukraine as a fifth or 10th priority. Russia will collapse anyway, so we don't need to change the way that we conduct policies. We don't need to spend much more or even more on defense. We don't need to be more active in counteracting and trying to persuade and pressure third world countries from maintaining economic lifelines in terms of trade and contacts with Russia. And we can still, dither whether we are going to take the interest from the frozen assets or we are going to take the frozen assets. I mean, this is in the long. I mean, this is there is not. Russia is not going to provide a solution for us.
Well, that's a very good point. I mean, many countries were trying to take a back seat, wait it out, thinking, okay, we're going to be seeing, Swan Lake being played in Russian state TV soon anyway, so why bother? But as you rightly pointed out, this has not been the case. It's not likely to happen in such a dramatic manner. Nevertheless, this brings me to the next question. Perceptions aside, do you think that Putin is losing control? And also, can he address these issues? I mean, drones buzzing around, flying hundreds of kilometers into Russian territory, hitting refineries. Hard to stop them. Unrest in certain republics erupting. Gunmen shooting cops in the streets. Again, seems like it is becoming all too easy to upset the balance, at least, on a small scale, within this massive country that is all about security. And yet it seems to be rather hard to defend against these manifestations of aggression or unrest.
Okay, again, it all depends on scale. Please remember that the Russian Federation was in much worse shape in the late 90s and early 21st century and managed to defeat massive nationalist and Islamic rebellion and significant terrorist movement in several republics in North Caucasus. There were cases where Republican capitals, the district capitals were attacked and by groups of up to 100 fighters or terrorists, depending on the point of view. And there had to be, pitched battles. We are very, very far from that. Such individual, yes, this is an. You have to look at the system as a kind of living organism. Some, the tensions and violence and these kind of incidents are part of it. As long as they don't cross certain threshold, they are just part of the. In a way, they kind of part of a system.
Okay, but what about the culture clash? Because it was pointed out in the article in Moscow Times also that there is a change in the ethnic composition of Russia, and we may soon actually be seeing this sort of clash between, on the other hand, the traditional Russian society, which tends to adopt the view that, they are supreme in every way. I mean, we're seeing it vis-a-vis Ukrainians. They essentially say Ukraine does not exist as a separate nation. But on the other hand, you got migrants from Central Asia, you got rising Islam, and they will demand respect. They will want to be treated fairly. Do you think that there is a risk that these two worldviews and these two attitudes are going to clash, especially in large urban areas such as Moscow, which is seeing a growing influx of migrants and especially of people of the Muslim faith?
Well, yes, this is a long-term problem, definitely. I think the attitude of large sections of the population is that if we have a pretty tough police and internal security system, we are safe. I mean, we are not going to allow such expressions of nationalist or religious attitudes to come to the surface. I think we are very far from that. On the other hand, the system is very good at corrupting and integrating, co-opting elites. So it's never. If you look, for example,
like in
the
Chechnya.
army and the FSB, yes, and Chechnya. Ethnic elites, formally Islamic elites, are part of the establishment. The official Muslim authorities in North Caucasus are part of the establishment. So it's not, in that sense, the system is based on many centuries of experience that Russian imperial statehood has in controlling and managing and suppressing multi-ethnic populations. And if you look at the army, there's quite a lot of generals and officers who come from North Caucasus, who, judging by their names, come from Muslim background.
Until recently, even Sergei Shoigu.
They fight for Ukraine. They fight for they fight for Russia in Ukraine. They fought for Russia. This is I think sort of projecting our ideas about how relations look in colonial areas, in Western colonial areas, especially in this postmodern simplification way, onto Russia is prevents us from seeing things as they are.
So one very quick question, we've got about half a minute. So Russia as a colonial empire, is it still going to last despite everything?
Well, we don't know. I mean, in the long run, probably not. But, in the long run, to quote a classic, we are all dead anyway. In terms of 50 years, 30 years, yeah, you can imagine next generation of non-Russians who are children of present immigrants. In other words, look, in the West is the same thing. It's those who were born to immigrants who want to have respect, participation, political power, equal rights, and so on and so on. But again, they were raised in a very peculiar atmosphere in societies where this is for granted. Whereas in Russia, people don't expect that. So where do these children of immigrants are going to take their cue from in terms of ideology, attitude to life, to authorities, and so on and so on.
So it's a sobering assessment that some people thinking that decolonization of Russia could happen, well, they might actually have to wait a little bit longer. Witold Rotkiewicz was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your expertise.
Thank you.
And now it's time for Eastern News Flash, a curated selection of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. The European Union member states have approved a new package of sanctions targeting Belarus. These measures aim to prevent the circumvention of restrictions previously imposed by the EU on Russia.
For a year and a half, the European Union has been trying to tighten existing sanctions on Belarus. All attempts have been rather unsuccessful until now. The EU has approved a package originally proposed by the European Commission in January 2023, focusing on aligning Belarus with the same restrictions already applied to Russia. Among others, these sanctions address areas such as the import of maritime navigation components, diamonds, gold and coal, as well as the prohibition of IT services within Belarus. Unofficial EU sources indicate that Belarus has been used as an intermediary for Russia to evade sanctions in recent months. By closing this loophole, the EU aims to strengthen its response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The agreement, reached by ambassadors from the 27 member countries, will now be confirmed by their respective foreign affairs ministers.
Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas is poised to become the European Union's next foreign policy chief. Kallas will replace Josep Borrell, who has held the position since 2019.
The European Union will soon have a new policy chief. This appointment of Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas to the post is part of a broader reshuffling of top EU positions, with Antonio Costa, Portugal's former Prime Minister, set to become the next President of the European Council. Sources in Brussels indicate consensus among the EU's 27 member states regarding the appointments of Kallas, Costa, and the current European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The official confirmation of these appointments is expected at the upcoming summit. Kallas gained international prominence during Russia's invasion of Ukraine, emerging as a vocal advocate of Western support. Estonia's substantial contribution of almost €560 million in aid to Ukraine, equivalent to 1.6% of its GDP, positions the country as a leading partner in Ukraine's international assistance efforts.
It is definitely a learning process for everybody.
The trial of Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich, who is accused of spying for the US, has commenced. If found guilty, Gershkovich could face up to 20 years in Russian prison.
Gershkovich, who has been detained for over a year on espionage charges, stood in a glass box during a brief appearance before journalists. He was seen with a shaven head, wearing an open-neck black and blue plaid shirt. The closed-door proceedings took place in the Ural city, where Gershkovich was arrested during a reporting trip in March 2023. He faces allegations of attempting to obtain military secrets for the CIA. The US Embassy in Moscow criticized the lack of evidence supporting the charges and called for Gershkovich's immediate release. They urged Russia to cease using US nationals as political leverage. The White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby labeled the trial a sham. He emphasized that Gershkovich, an American-born son of immigrants from the former Soviet Union, has never worked for the US government or acted as a spy.
Igor Dodon, the pro-Russian leader of Moldova's largest opposition party and former president, has declined to commit to running in Moldova's upcoming presidential election. His goal is to defeat incumbent Maia Sandu and her pro-EU agenda.
Igor Dodon accuses President Maia Sandu and the current Moldovan government of violating Moldova's neutral status. He even suggested that if he were in power, he would shut off the country as a conduit of supplying weapons to Ukraine. Dodon also refused to rescind a previous threat made during a visit to Russia, to refuse to recognize the election results if Sandu emerges victorious in the October presidential election. Recent polls show Sandu with 30 to 35% support compared to Dodon's 16%. Sandu, a former prime minister and founder of the Liberal Party of Action and Solidarity, derailed Dodon's presidential re-election bid in 2020. She pledged to accelerate pro-EU reforms and curb corruption. Sandu's unwavering support for Kiev and pursuit of energy independence from Russia have shaped Moldova's politics, security and economy. She has also demanded an end to the presence of Russian troops in Moldova's breakaway Transnistria region.
And for this episode of Eastern Express, it's the end of the line. Please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.